In episode 6, you find out exactly what happened to Leanne in the park. She was attacked by those people. Her head was cut when they slammed it against a tree, but she was saved by the homeless teens in the park. She was just as shocked as the people that were killed. She was pretty scared and asked, "What do you want from me? I'm not like you." And the one with the heart condition said, "Yes, we know. You said no to him, and you're still alive." Leanne asks, "Aren't you with them?" And the kid says, "Not anymore." So because of Leanne, these homeless teens have turned their allegiance to whoever was in power of the Church of the Lesser Saints, to Leanne. That doesn't mean Leanne isn't still freaked out. The next day, she sleeps in and is awoken by Dorothy, who wants to let her know that she's proud of her. She tells Leanne, "You ventured out, and look, nothing happened." Of course, Dorothy is completely oblivious to what did happen. Leanne doesn't correct her, and Dorothy goes on to check on Jericho. And Jericho is crying his eyes out. Dorothy yells at Sean for abandoning their child, but it's not like Sean actually abandoned Jericho. He got a phone call once again from the people from Gourmet Gauntlet. He stepped maybe 4 feet to the left to take it. He told them this really isn't a good time. So when Dorothy walks in, she wants to know exactly who he was on the phone with and grabs his phone to check. When she finds out that Gourmet Gauntlet called Sean, she gets really excited for him, especially when he tells her that they want him to host because it's coming to Philly next year. Dorothy has blocked out Sean ever going on Gourmet Gauntlet the first time. So for Dorothy, this is a new experience. And she's thrilled. She's really excited for her husband in this opportunity. Sean, though, doesn't tell her about what happened the first time. So it's really confusing to Dorothy when Sean says, "I'm not going to do it. I mean, for the family, I'm not going to do it." Because Dorothy's feeling is, "Sean, you have to do it." She leaves Sean, but she's not done trying to convince him that he needs to do the show. She goes downstairs to garden and has Leanne help her out. And she starts telling Leanne about the fact that Sean's being ridiculous saying no to this TV show. Dorothy feels like it's her duty as a wife to push him into this opportunity. She tells Leanne, "I bet this new minister lady has him convinced that ambition isn't virtuous." And this is the first time Leanne is hearing about a new minister. Dorothy looks over at Leanne pretty surprised and says, "Oh, he didn't tell you either? Sean's having an affair with God. I invited this minister to dinner tomorrow because you got to keep your friends close but your enemies closer." After Leanne wraps up with Dorothy, she goes and has a conversation with Sean, because Leanne understands why Sean doesn't want to do the show. And she reassures Sean, "It'll be different this time. I'm here." But while Sean appreciates the sentiment, he tells Leanne, pride comes before the fall. The next day, before Nancy comes over for dinner, Dorothy drags Leanne out to the park. She feels like it's good for her healing process. As soon as they step foot in the park, though, Leanne is super uncomfortable. She actually runs back home and crouches down in the fetal position in her room. When she finally gets up, she goes in the bathroom, looks in the mirror, and just repeats to herself, "You're safe now. Act like it." As Leanne is trying to remind herself that she's not in any real danger, Dorothy is outside tending to her garden when the homeless teen with the heart condition comes in. Dorothy, when she returned from the park, left the gate open, and she's pretty freaked out when this kid walks in and says, "Is Leanne home?" Dorothy, who is pretty freaked out, tells him no. And then the kid asks her, "Can you check?" Dorothy tells the kid that this is private property and tells him that she'll call the cops if he stays. The whole family then gets ready for dinner that night with Nancy. Even Julian's invited over. But Julian is once again without Vera. And when Leanne asks, "Where is she?" he says, "I have no idea. I'm not a mind reader." Julian then asks her, "Is the minister here?" And Leanne says, "No, but I look forward to meeting her," with a lot of attitude. And Julian thinks that Leanne's jealous because this woman is stepping on Leanne's holy turf. Right before dinner, though, Dorothy hears the washing machine go off. When she goes downstairs and checks, she finds the overalls from the previous day, and the blood never came out. Why there'd be blood on the overalls is really concerning to Dorothy. So she goes and checks the security footage, and she sees Leanne fighting with the people in her house, Leanne running through the house, Leanne running out the back, and then Leanne returning. She now feels really guilty about dragging Leanne to the park. As Dorothy is finding out exactly what happened to Leanne the other night, Julian is downstairs, quote, trying to convince Sean that he should go on the TV show. Dorothy put him up to it, but in reality, Julian's on Sean's side. He says, "You can't do this, and you know exactly why you can't do this." There's really not much of a discussion, though, because they both agree on that. There's then a knock at the door, and it's Nancy. It's pretty cold outside, and even though Leanne is really close to the door, she lets Nancy wait a few extra seconds before she answers it. She opens the door for Nancy, but she doesn't really invite her in. She's pretty rude to her. Leanne sits in the dining room, and when Nancy comes in and says, "Are they in the kitchen?" Leanne tells Nancy, "You should stay here with me." A few seconds later, though, Sean comes out and asks Leanne, why didn't you come get us? Leanne just says, you were busy. Dorothy then comes downstairs, says a quick hello to Nancy, but asks Leanne, can I have a word with you? She asks Leanne, why didn't you tell us what happened? And Leanne's more concerned with the fact that Dorothy's been watching her. She does then tell Dorothy, I just didn't want you to worry. And Dorothy can't figure out why everybody's so worried about Dorothy worrying. As she puts it, it's my job to worry. She starts asking Leanne who these people were that chased her through the house. But as she's asking the question, she's figuring out, yes, they were a part of the cult. Leanne tells Dorothy that she's fine. And when Dorothy says to Leanne, you must be terrified, Leanne says, no, I'm not scared anymore. I'm just not ready yet. Dorothy asks, not ready for what? But Leanne doesn't get a chance to answer because Julian knocks on the door and says, you left me out here with Sean and the minister. Can you come save me? So dinner kicks off, and Dorothy's pretty rude to Nancy. Julian isn't as rude as Dorothy, but he's not much better. But by far, the rudest person is Leanne. She is shooting Nancy death stares the entire time. It's pretty uncomfortable for Nancy. She feels the fact that Leanne, for whatever reason, hates her. Throughout the dinner, though, Nancy inadvertently reveals that Sean was already on Gourmet Gauntlet when the topic comes up. There was a guy at the service who was really geeked out over the fact that Sean showed up the first time, because he watches every episode. And that throws Dorothy completely off. Both Julian and Sean try to cover it by saying that Dorothy has a horrible memory, but it definitely piques Dorothy's interest. Throughout the dinner, Sean ends up apologizing to everybody, saying it's the worst meal he's ever cooked. And Nancy, picking out a hair from her food, says, so I don't have to eat this? As she's laughing, it's clearly a joke. But Leanne, stone-faced, says, Mr. Turner's cooking is not a joke. Sean tries to smooth things over by saying that Leanne is religious, but she says, not anymore. When Sean asks, when did that happen? Leanne says, since I outgrew make-believe. The more and more Susan tries to be nice to Leanne, the more rude Leanne is. Leanne actually goes so far as to say, I see you, Susan. You're rotten inside. Because Leanne is aware that Susan, before she became a minister, beat on her mother who had dementia. It's something that Sean knows because Susan has told her ministry group, but it's not exactly a well-known thing, and it's nothing that Leanne could have possibly just figured out on her own. So when Susan tells Leanne, I just want to let you know, my door is always open if you want to talk about anything. Leanne says, anything? Really? My secrets and yours? Susan is getting visibly uncomfortable. She thanks the Turners and tries to leave, but that's when Leanne brings up the fact that Susan probably liked it, as she beat on her mother. Susan starts crying. She turns to Sean and says, you realize what we talk about in service is private, right? And Sean says, yeah, I didn't tell anybody. But somehow, Leanne knows. And finally it gets to the point where Susan snaps. She yells at Leanne, how dare you? You judge me. But Leanne doesn't back down at all. When Susan leaves the house, she tells Sean, stay away from me. Because of this revelation, Julian hops on the internet and does a deep dive into Susan's name and finds a subreddit thread describing exactly what she did to her mother. He asks Leanne, how did you know about that? And Leanne actually says, I just guessed. She then asks Julian to teach her how to smoke weed. And luckily for Julian, he has a stash hidden away in the Turner residence, so he grabs it, lights the joint for Leanne, and starts teaching her exactly what to do. But that's when the homeless teen shows up out of nowhere, asking if Leanne's okay. Julian screams at him to leave, but he waits for Leanne to answer, and she tells him, I'm fine. Thank you for checking on me. Dorothy then comes outside and catches Leanne and Julian smoking up and tells them to get inside. After Dorothy puts Jericho down for the night, she hops on YouTube, and she sees what exactly Susan was talking about. She sees the guest spot that Sean did on Gourmet Gauntlet, and she just does not look right. I don't know if it's because she remembers what happened or the fact that she's troubled by the fact that she didn't remember this, but she looks concerned. Meanwhile, Sean went to go have a conversation with Leanne about her behavior, and Leanne's only explanation is, Nancy sucks. But just like Julian, Sean wants to know exactly how Leanne knew that story about Susan, because there's no way she could have. He says, I thought we were on the same side here. And Leanne says, I'm always on your side. Could you be on my side for once? And Sean right away says, we are on your side. We're always on your side. But Leanne says, no, you're not. Not like... And she stops herself. Sean tells Leanne that he believes in God, even if she doesn't, because God brought Jericho back to him through Leanne. But Leanne tells him God didn't bring Jericho back. When Sean asks, well, then who did? She doesn't answer the question, just telling Sean to take the job. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought this sucked. Make sure to be nice in the comment section. If you don't see the next video up in the end screen there, I'll get it up in a few days, not to worry. And I have merchandise, so go buy a mug or something. It's never too early to think about Christmas gifts, folks. Once again, thank you for checking out this recap.